Three little boys walked into their father's house on Thanksgiving Eve, 2010. None of them ever walked out. For 15 years, their father kept a secret that would finally catch up to him just days before he was set to walk free. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some mysteries take over a decade to solve, and why sometimes the person who knows the truth has been in front of us all along. The holidays are supposed to be about family, warmth, and togetherness. For most of us, Thanksgiving brings images of crowded dining tables, the smell of roasted turkey, and the laughter of children playing in autumn leaves. But for the Skelton family, Thanksgiving 2010 would mark the beginning of a nightmare that still hasn't ended. It would be the last time anyone outside of one man would ever see Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton alive. This is a story about three brothers who disappeared without a trace. It's about a father whose explanations kept changing, about investigators who refused to give up, and about a mother who has lived 15 years without answers. It's about the fine line between suspicion and proof, and about how justice can take more than a decade to arrive. This is the untold story of the Skelton brothers. Let's start at the very beginning, because to understand what happened on that fateful Thanksgiving weekend, we need to understand the family at the center of this tragedy. John Skelton wasn't always the man who would become known as the father of three missing boys. He started life in Florida, just an ordinary kid growing up under the sunshine of the Sunshine State. After completing high school, John made a decision that many young men make when they're looking for direction, purpose, or simply a way forward in life. He enlisted in the military. Military service would take him far from the warm beaches of Florida to one of America's most remote and challenging locations, Alaska. Alaska is not an easy posting. The long, dark winters, the isolation, the harsh conditions, these things test a person. They reveal character. They shape who you become. John served his time there, and eventually his military chapter came to a close. Like many veterans, he needed to figure out what came next, where to build a life, where to call home. John eventually found his way to Morenci, Michigan. Now, if you're not familiar with Morenci, let me paint you a picture. This is small-town America in every sense of the phrase. Morenci is a tiny community, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where Friday night high school football games are major events, and where the biggest employer is often the local school district. It sits in Lenawee County, right near the Michigan-Ohio border. The population hovers around 2,000 people. It's the kind of town where a missing child doesn't just make the news, it shatters an entire community. It was in this small Michigan town that John Skelton would try to build a normal life. And for a while, it seemed like he had succeeded. In 2002, John married a woman named Tanya. This wasn't a fresh start for either of them. Both John and Tanya were coming into this marriage with history, with children from previous relationships, with the complications that come from blended families. Tanya had 2 daughters from before. John had 1 child as well, but they were committed to making it work, to creating a family that could weather anything. And then came the boys. Andrew was born first, then Alexander, and finally Tanner. 3 sons in relatively quick succession. Suddenly, this blended family had grown into something substantial. There were 6 children in total under one roof. The house was full of noise, of life, of the chaos that comes with raising multiple children at different ages and stages. John worked as a long-haul truck driver. It's demanding work. You're away from home for days or sometimes weeks at a time. You're driving through the night, through weather, through fatigue. You're missing birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories, but it pays the bills. For a family with 6 children, paying the bills isn't optional, it's essential. And for several years, John did exactly that. He worked the long routes, came home when he could, and helped support his family. From the outside looking in, the Skeltons seemed like they were managing. Sure, money was sometimes tight. That's true for most families with multiple children, and yes, there were the usual squabbles and disagreements that happen in any household. Who left the milk out? Who forgot to do their chores? Who's hogging the television? Normal family stuff, the kind of arguments that blow over by dinner time. But beneath the surface, things were more complicated than they appeared. Blended families always come with unique challenges. There are questions of fairness, of favoritism, of divided loyalties. There are adjustments that need to be made, boundaries that need to be respected. And sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, the cracks start to show. By the time we reached 2010, those cracks had become fault lines. John had lost his job as a truck driver. In small-town America, losing your job isn't just about losing income, though that's devastating enough. It's about losing structure, losing purpose, losing the identity that comes from being a provider. The bills don't stop coming just because the paychecks do. The financial pressure starts to mount. The stress seeps into every corner of family life. John and Tanya's marriage, which had weathered so much already, began to buckle under the strain. The arguments became more frequent, more intense. The love that had brought them together was being tested in ways neither of them had anticipated. And the children, especially the three boys, were caught in the middle of it all. Then came September of 2010. What happened that month would be a preview of the tragedy to come, a warning sign that everyone would look back on with heartbreak and regret. On what seemed like an ordinary school day, John picked up Andrew and Alexander from school. This wasn't unusual. Parents pick up their children from school every single day. But what John did next was very unusual indeed. Instead of taking the boys home, instead of following the normal routine, he sent Tanya a text message. The message was short and shocking. He was taking the boys to Florida. Not that he was thinking about it, not that he wanted to discuss it. He was doing it. Right then. He was taking their children across state lines, away from their mother, away from their home, away from everything they knew. Tanya's reaction was immediate. She called the police. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. This was parental abduction in progress. Law enforcement got involved quickly. They contacted John. They talked to him. They convinced him to turn the car around and bring the boys back. And he did. Crisis averted, right? The boys were safe. John had seen reason. Maybe this was just a momentary lapse in judgment, a panic response to the stress he was under. Maybe everything would be okay now. Except it wasn't okay. Because later that very same day, just hours after agreeing to bring the boys home, John took them again. This time, he didn't just think about driving to Florida. He actually did it. He got in the car with Andrew and Alexander and headed south, putting miles and state lines between him and Tanya. For Tanya, this was the breaking point. This wasn't a cry for help. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act that showed her she could no longer trust John with their children's safety. On that day, September of 2010, Tanner Skelton filed for divorce. It took about a week, but eventually the boys came home safely. John returned them. The immediate crisis was over. But the damage had been done. The marriage was finished. The legal separation was underway. And John was facing the reality that his family, as he had known it, was falling apart. Still, life had to go on. Arrangements had to be made. The boys needed stability, routine, and time with both parents. Divorce is hard on everyone, but it's especially hard on children. They didn't choose any of this. They just wanted their mom and their dad and some sense of normalcy. Which brings us to Thanksgiving. The holiday schedule had been worked out. The boys, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, would spend Thanksgiving with their father. It was supposed to be a simple holiday visit. They would go to John's house, spend some time with their dad, maybe watch some football, eat some turkey, and then come home to their mother the next day. Just a normal custody arrangement during a difficult time for the family. Wednesday, November 24th, 2010. The day before Thanksgiving. It's mid-afternoon, around 3 o'clock. The boys are dropped off at John's house. Andrew is 9 years old now, growing into that preteen stage where everything is starting to shift. Alexander is 7, full of energy and curiosity. And Tanner, sweet little Tanner, is just 5 years old, still so small, still so innocent, still believing that adults will always keep him safe. But before we get to what happened next, There's something else you need to know about that Wednesday. Something that, in hindsight, feels like a warning that no one could have understood at the time. That same day, a message appeared on John Skelton's Facebook page. Social media was different back in 2010. Facebook was still relatively new as a widespread phenomenon. People were just beginning to understand its power, its permanence, the way that words typed in a moment of emotion could be seen by dozens or hundreds of people instantly. The message John posted was brief, but it was chilling. It read, "I love my wife very much. May God and Tanya forgive me." Think about that for a moment. May God and Tanya forgive me. Those are not the words of someone planning a normal holiday weekend with their children. Those are the words of someone who knows they're about to do something terrible. Those are the words of someone saying goodbye. But at the time, who could have known what it really meant? Tanya was dealing with a painful divorce. Maybe she saw the post and thought John was being dramatic. Maybe she thought he was having a hard time emotionally and reaching out in the only way he knew how. Maybe she hoped he would get help. Or maybe she never saw it at all until it was too late. Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, November 25th, 2010. For most American families, this is a day of gratitude, of gathering, of making memories. Somewhere in Morenci, Michigan, 3 little boys are at their father's house. Neighbors report seeing them that afternoon, playing in the backyard. Just normal kids doing normal kid things. Running around, maybe tossing a football, enjoying the freedom of a day off from school. That's the last confirmed sighting of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton. 3 boys playing in a backyard on Thanksgiving afternoon. After that, they vanished as if they had never existed at all. What happened in the hours that followed? Only one person knows for sure, and he's never told the truth about it. Here's what we do know. Pieced together from cell phone records, witness statements, and police investigation. In the early morning hours of Friday, November 26th, the day after Thanksgiving, John Skelton's cell phone starts moving. The phone, and presumably John along with it, travels south from Morenci, Michigan, into Ohio. The distance covered is approximately 20 miles, not a long drive. Maybe 25 or 30 minutes depending on the roads you take and how fast you're going. And then, something very deliberate happens. The phone goes dark. It's not that it loses signal. It's not that the battery dies. According to investigators, the phone is powered off, completely shut down. Someone made a conscious choice to turn that phone off, to stop it from pinging cell towers, to stop it from creating a digital trail of where it was and where it was going. The phone stays off for hours. And then, around 6 o'clock in the morning, it comes back on. And when it does, it's back in Michigan. Back in Morenci. Back at, or near, John Skelton's house. Later that same Friday morning, John shows up at a local hospital emergency room. He has an injured ankle. Medical staff ask him what happened, how he sustained the injury. According to reports, John tells them he hurt his ankle during an attempt to harm himself at his home. The specific method he describes involves a noose. Now think about the timeline here. The boys were last seen Thursday afternoon. Early Friday morning, John's phone travels into Ohio and goes dark. By Friday morning, he's at a hospital with an injury, telling a story about self-harm. And the boys? Nobody knows where the boys are. As Friday wears on, Tanya starts making calls. She's expecting John to bring the boys home. That was the arrangement. They were supposed to spend Thanksgiving with their dad and come home the next day. But Friday is slipping away, and there's no sign of Andrew, Alexander, or Tanner. She calls John. "Where are the boys? When are you bringing them back?" John's response is vague. He tells her the boys are with a friend, a woman named Joanne Taylor. She's going to drop them off. "Don't worry. Everything's fine." But Tanya is worried. She doesn't know anyone named Joanne Taylor. John's never mentioned this person before. Why would he leave their 3 young sons with someone Tanya has never met, never heard of? It doesn't make sense. Nothing about this makes sense. As more time passes and the boys still don't appear, Tanya presses harder. Where exactly are they? How can I reach them? What's Joanne Taylor's phone number? Now John's story starts to change. He becomes uncertain. Maybe he's not sure who has the boys. Maybe he doesn't know exactly where they are. The details keep shifting. That's when Tanya makes the call that will change everything. She contacts the police and reports her 3 sons missing. When law enforcement arrives and starts asking questions, they hear John's story about Joanne Taylor for the first time. According to John, he met this woman years ago. She had a flat tire somewhere, and John, being a helpful guy, stopped to assist her. They exchanged information and stayed in touch online over the years. Fast forward to Thanksgiving 2010, and John is in crisis. He's afraid of what he might do to himself. He doesn't want his boys to be there if something terrible happens. So, he reaches out to this woman, this Joanne Taylor, and asks her to take the boys temporarily. She agrees. He hands them over to her. They're safe with her. It's a strange story, but on the surface it has just enough detail to sound plausible. People do help strangers with flat tires. People do stay in touch online. People in crisis sometimes make unusual decisions about childcare. Maybe it's true. Except the police can't find Joanne Taylor. They search databases. They check social media. They look through public records. They follow every possible lead, and they come up empty. There is no woman by that name matching the description John gives. There's no digital footprint, no phone number, no address, no evidence that this person exists at all. When investigators tell John that they can't find any trace of Joanne Taylor, he doesn't seem surprised or concerned. He doesn't offer additional information to help them locate her. He just maintains that he gave the boys to her. At this point, the Morenci community is in crisis mode. 3 little boys are missing. Every hour that passes makes their safe return less likely. Volunteers organize search parties. They comb through wooded areas, abandoned buildings, anywhere. 3 children might be hidden or lost. Police expand the search into Ohio, following the trail of that cell phone ping from early Friday morning. They bring in dogs, helicopters, and dive teams. They check rivers and ponds and culverts. They interview neighbors, friends, family members, anyone who might have seen or heard something. But there's nothing. No sign of the boys. No evidence of where they might have gone. It's as if they simply evaporated into thin air. John Skelton is arrested. Initially, he's not charged with harming his children. There's no evidence of that, at least not yet. But he did fail to return them to their mother as arranged. That's a crime. It's called parental abduction, and it's taken very seriously, especially when children remain missing. Once John is in custody, investigators sit down with him for formal interviews. They need answers. They need to know where Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner are. They need to bring these boys home. But John's story, already questionable, now takes an even stranger turn. Suddenly, Joanne Taylor isn't mentioned anymore. Instead, John introduces a new explanation. He claims he didn't give the boys to a person. He gave them to an organization, an underground group called United Foster Outreach and Rescue. According to John, this is a secret network of people who help children escape dangerous situations. They operate outside the normal foster care system. They move kids to safe locations where abusive parents can't find them. John says he contacted this group because he believed his sons were in danger from their mother, and the organization agreed to take them in. It's an elaborate story. It has the ring of something you might see in a movie or read in a thriller novel. Underground rescue networks, secret safe houses, children spirited away in the night to protect them from harm. It sounds dramatic and heroic in a way. But there's one very big problem with this story. The police say United Foster Outreach and Rescue doesn't exist, just like Joanne Taylor doesn't exist. Investigators check into it thoroughly. They reach out to child welfare organizations, to foster care networks, to nonprofits that work with at-risk children. Nobody has ever heard of United Foster Outreach and Rescue. There's no website, no documentation, no evidence that this organization has ever existed or helped anyone. When confronted with this, John doesn't back down. He insists the group is real. They have to stay underground, he explains. That's the whole point. If they were easy to find, If they had public websites and offices, they wouldn't be able to help children escape dangerous situations. The secrecy is necessary. It's part of how they operate. But the investigators aren't buying it. They've heard a lot of stories over the years, a lot of explanations from people who've done terrible things. And John's explanations, both the story about Joanne Taylor and now this underground organization, have all the hallmarks of lies designed to buy time and create confusion. Then, as the investigation deepens, more disturbing details begin to emerge. Police obtain a warrant to examine John's computer, the one in his house where the boys were last seen. When digital forensic specialists analyze the search history, they find something deeply unsettling. According to reports, including coverage by CNN, there were internet searches conducted shortly before the boys disappeared. The searches were related to ways to cause serious harm. Specifically, the terms included things like neck breaking and poison. When confronted about these searches, John has an explanation ready. He says the boys were interested in those topics. They had watched a martial arts movie together on Thanksgiving night. There was a scene in the movie where someone slipped and broke their neck. The boys, being curious kids, wanted to know more about how that could happen. So John says they all sat down together at the computer and looked it up. Just a father and his sons, learning about anatomy and injuries. Nothing sinister about it at all. Later, in interviews with true crime podcasters and journalists, John would expand on this explanation. He describes the evening as innocent and educational. The boys asked questions. He answered them. They were interested in karate and martial arts, so naturally they had questions about the techniques and the risks. Any responsible parent would help their children understand these things, right? But investigators see this very differently. They see a man whose children have vanished, whose explanations keep changing, and whose computer history shows searches for methods of causing death just before those children disappeared. That's not curiosity, that's premeditation. Despite all of this, despite the implausible stories and the suspicious timeline and the damning computer searches, John maintains his innocence. He insists repeatedly that he never harmed his sons. He says they are alive and safe somewhere, being cared for by people who have their best interests at heart. He positions himself not as a perpetrator, but as a protector. He claims he did what he had to do to save his boys from a dangerous situation. And what was that dangerous situation? According to John, it was their mother. He accuses Tanya of abusing the children. These are serious allegations, the kind that investigators have to take seriously and look into thoroughly. John points to something specific in Tanya's past to support his claims. Back in 1998, 12 years before the boys disappeared, Tanya was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct involving a 14-year-old boy. This is a matter of public record. It happened. Tanya served her sentence and moved on with her life. But John uses this conviction as the foundation for his argument that she was a danger to their sons. Here's the critical thing, though. Investigators looked into John's allegations about Tanya extensively. They interviewed teachers, doctors, family members, and anyone else who had regular contact with the boys. They looked for any signs of abuse or neglect. They examined medical records. They did everything they were supposed to do when allegations of child abuse are made. And they found nothing. Not a single piece of evidence to support John's claims. The boys' teachers said they seemed happy and well cared for. Their doctors saw no signs of physical abuse. There were no reports to Child Protective Services. There was nothing at all to suggest that Tanya was harming her children. Furthermore, when the divorce and custody arrangements were being worked out, the courts had reviewed Tanya's background. They knew about her past conviction. They evaluated her fitness as a parent, and they had no hesitation in granting her primary custody of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. The legal system, after due consideration, determined that Tanya was a fit and proper parent for her children. So John's justification for giving the boys away, for hiding them from their mother, doesn't hold up under scrutiny. It appears to be exactly what investigators suspected from the beginning, a story designed to make his actions seem noble rather than criminal. When police finally get access to John's house to search it properly, what they find is telling. The scene inside is chaotic. There's broken glass scattered around, Various appliances have had their cords cut, and there's a noose or materials that appear to have been fashioned into one. The house looks like the scene of someone in crisis, someone who was either genuinely suicidal or wanted to create that impression. But more importantly, it doesn't look like a house where 3 young boys had been playing and living just days before. Something violent or disturbing had clearly happened there. Despite the mounting evidence and the inconsistencies in his story, John is not immediately charged with murder. Why? Because there are no bodies. There's no physical evidence that the boys are dead. There's no blood, no weapons, no crime scene that clearly indicates homicide. Without that evidence, without remains, proving murder beyond a reasonable doubt is incredibly difficult. Prosecutors know that if they charge someone with murder and can't prove it, that person walks free and can never be charged again for the same crime. It's better to wait, to build a case, to be absolutely certain. So in 2011, John Skelton is charged with something the evidence definitely supports: unlawful imprisonment. This charge relates specifically to the fact that he took the boys and failed to return them to their mother as arranged. He had legal custody for the holiday visit, but he was required by the custody agreement to return them afterward. He didn't. That's unlawful imprisonment. John pleads no contest to the charge. A no contest plea is different from a guilty plea. It means the defendant doesn't admit guilt, but acknowledges that the evidence against them is sufficient for a conviction. It's a legal distinction that sometimes matters and sometimes doesn't. But in practical terms, pleading no contest has the same result as pleading guilty: a conviction. The judge sentences John Skelton to the maximum term allowed for unlawful imprisonment: 15 years in prison. 15 years to think about what he's done. 15 years during which investigators hope he might finally tell the truth. 15 years during which search efforts for the boys continue, even as hope fades with each passing month and year. But even behind bars, John doesn't cooperate. In fact, over the years that follow, he seems to take some twisted pleasure in sending investigators on wild goose chases. He periodically provides new information, new leads, new names of people who supposedly know where the boys are. And every single time, these leads go nowhere. They're dead ends. Lies designed to waste time and resources, or perhaps to maintain some sense of control over a situation where John has none. One of the most bizarre examples of this happened several years into John's sentence. He contacted investigators and gave them a name: an Amish man. According to John, this man had information about the boys' whereabouts. He could help find them. John provided enough details that police were able to track this man down. Now, when police approach this Amish gentleman and explain why they're there, the man is completely baffled. He has no idea what they're talking about. He's never met John Skelton. He's never heard anything about missing boys from Michigan. He can't imagine why his name has come up in this investigation at all. He's simply going about his life, being a law-abiding member of his community, and suddenly he's caught up in a missing persons case that has nothing to do with him. But the investigators don't just take the man's word for it and walk away. They can't. This case is too important. 3 children's lives are at stake. So they make an extraordinary decision. They arrange to bring this Amish man to Michigan. They set up a meeting at the prison where John is incarcerated. The idea is simple. If John is somehow confused about identity or memory, seeing this man face to face might jog something loose. Or if John is lying, confronting him directly with his lie might break through his defenses and get him to finally tell the truth. The meeting happens. The Amish man sits across from John Skelton in a prison visiting room with investigators present. And nothing comes of it. John doesn't suddenly remember anything useful. He doesn't break down and confess. The meeting produces exactly 0 helpful information about where Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner might be. So investigators are left with a question. How did John even know this man's name? Where did it come from? And eventually, they figure it out. The Amish man had appeared in a reality television program about people leaving Amish communities. It was a show that documented the challenges and cultural transitions people face when they decide to leave their traditional Amish way of life. The show aired on cable television and was available in various forms, including potentially in the prison where John was incarcerated. It appears that John watched this show, saw this man's name and face, and then cynically used that information to send investigators on a pointless chase. That's the level of cooperation law enforcement has been dealing with for years. John Skelton hasn't been helping to find his sons. He's been playing games. Throughout all of this, Tanner Skelton has been living in a special kind of hell. Her 3 sons disappeared on a holiday visit with their father and never came home. She doesn't know if they're alive or dead. She doesn't know if they suffered. She doesn't know where they are. She can't visit graves. She can't have closure. She's stuck in an eternal state of not knowing, which might be the cruelest fate imaginable for a mother. For 15 years, Tanner has had to wake up every single day without her boys. She's had to see their photos, remember their laughs, think about what they would look like now. Andrew would be 24 years old by now. Alexander would be 22. Tanner would be 20. They would be young men, possibly in college or starting careers, maybe thinking about relationships and their own futures. But instead, they're frozen in time as 9, 7, and 5. Forever, the little boys playing in their father's backyard on Thanksgiving Day, 2010. The years pass slowly. The case goes cold in the public eye, though investigators never fully give up. Tips still come in periodically. New technologies for searching and analyzing evidence become available. The case files remain open. But there are no major breaks, no discoveries that change everything, just the slow, grinding passage of time. And then, in 2025, 15 years after the boys disappeared, something shifts. In March of that year, Tanner petitions the court for something she never wanted to do, but knows is necessary. She asks a judge to declare Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner legally dead. This is not about giving up. This is about facing reality. Those boys have been missing for a decade and a half without any credible sighting or evidence of life. Tanner needs to be able to move forward with certain legal and practical matters, and she can't do that while her sons are in a legal limbo between living and deceased. It's a heartbreaking decision, but she makes it. The judge grants her petition. In March 2025, Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton are legally declared deceased. On paper, at least, the years of uncertainty are over. Those boys are gone. But that's not the end of the story, because John Skelton, the man who knows what really happened to his sons, is about to get out of prison. Remember, he was sentenced to 15 years for unlawful imprisonment back in 2011. 15 years from 2011 is 2026. His mandatory release date is set for November 29, 2025. Think about what that means. The man responsible for 3 children vanishing, the man who has lied and obstructed and played games for 15 years, the man who has never told the truth about what happened to his sons, is about to walk out of prison a free man. He would have served his full sentence for unlawful imprisonment. He couldn't be held any longer on that charge. Without new charges, he would be released. The community is horrified. Tanner is devastated. How can the man who did this just go free? How can there be no justice for Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner? Prosecutors have been watching the calendar too. They know the release date is coming. They've been reviewing the case file, looking at the evidence, considering their options. The question they have to answer is whether they have enough to charge John with murder, even without bodies, even without a crime scene, even without the kind of physical evidence that usually supports a homicide prosecution. And they decide that they do. They decide that the totality of circumstances, the pattern of lies, the suspicious computer searches, the timeline, the cell phone evidence, the complete absence of any credible alternative explanation for where the boys are, all of it adds up to murder. On November 3rd, 2025, investigators conduct one more interview with John Skelton. It's been over a decade of interviews, of conversations, of requests for information. But they try again. Where are your sons, John? What happened to them? Help us bring them home. John refuses to cooperate. According to court documents, he provides no useful information. He doesn't tell investigators anything that would help locate his missing sons. It's the same pattern that's been going on for 15 years. Silence, evasion, lies, and misdirection. That interview is documented in the probable cause affidavit, the legal document that prosecutors prepare when they're charging someone with a crime. And it's one of the pieces of evidence they use to support the charges they're about to file. 2 weeks before John Skelton's scheduled release date, the other shoe drops. Prosecutors charge him with 3 counts of murder in the deaths of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton. 3 little boys who went to visit their father for Thanksgiving and never came home. 3 children whose bodies have never been found. 3 lives cut short, allegedly by the one person who was supposed to protect them above all others. The charges are significant. Murder in Michigan carries severe penalties, potentially life in prison without the possibility of parole. If convicted, John Skelton would never breathe free air again. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, which is exactly what many people believe he deserves. But charging someone with murder and convicting them are 2 different things. Prosecutors now face the challenge of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that John Skelton murdered his 3 sons. Despite the absence of bodies, despite the lack of a clear crime scene, despite all the things that usually make a murder case straightforward. They're not without evidence, though. They have John's constantly changing stories, none of which have ever been verified or proven true. They have the computer searches for ways to cause death, conducted just before the boys disappeared. They have the cell phone records showing John traveling into Ohio in the middle of the night and then turning his phone off for hours. They have his own statement about attempting self-harm with a noose, suggesting he was in an extremely dark mental state that Thanksgiving weekend. They have 15 years of John refusing to provide any real information about where the boys are. And, most damning of all, they have the simple fact that 3 children vanished completely while in their father's care and have never been seen again. No credible sighting in 15 years. No records of them attending school anywhere. No medical visits. No interactions with anyone. 3 boys didn't just disappear into thin air. Something happened to them. And John Skelton is the last person who saw them alive. The legal process is now underway. John has been arraigned on the murder charges. He maintains his innocence, as he has for 15 years. He'll have attorneys who will challenge the prosecution's case, who will argue that without bodies, without direct evidence of death, you can't prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. It's going to be a difficult case to prosecute, but it's not impossible. People have been convicted of murder without bodies before. It's rare, but it happens when the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. The trial, whenever it happens, will be closely watched. Not just in Morenci, Michigan, but across the country. This case has haunted people for 15 years. True crime followers, amateur investigators, concerned citizens. They've all wondered what happened to the Skelton brothers. The trial will finally bring all the evidence into open court. Both sides will present their cases. Witnesses will testify. Experts will offer their opinions. And a jury will have to decide, did John Skelton murder his 3 sons? Whatever the outcome, nothing will bring Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner back. Nothing will give Tanya the chance to see her boys grow up, to attend their graduations, to meet their partners, to hold their children. Nothing will undo the trauma that has rippled through the Morenci community and beyond. The damage is done, the lives are lost, but there might yet be justice. There might be accountability. There might be a moment when John Skelton finally has to face the full consequences of what he did on Thanksgiving weekend, 2010. And there might be a chance, however small, that he finally tells the truth about where his sons are, so that they can be brought home, so that there can be graves to visit, so that there can be some small measure of peace. For now, though, the case remains open in every sense that matters. Open in the legal system, as it works its way toward trial. Open in the hearts of everyone who has followed this story and hoped for a different ending. And open in the minds of investigators who have spent 15 years trying to answer one simple, heartbreaking question. What happened to the Skelton brothers? The answer, when it comes, will likely be painful. The evidence suggests that those 3 boys didn't make it through that Thanksgiving weekend. That their father, for reasons we may never fully understand, made a choice that ended their lives. That somewhere in Michigan or Ohio or beyond, There are 3 sets of remains that have been hidden for 15 years, waiting to be found. But until that day comes, until there's a verdict or a confession or a discovery that changes everything, we're left with the story as we know it. A story of 3 innocent children, a broken family, a web of lies, and a mystery that has consumed investigators and haunted a community for a decade and a half. The Skelton Brothers case reminds us of several uncomfortable truths about the world we live in. It reminds us that the people we trust most, our own family members, are sometimes the ones who harm us. It reminds us that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like an ordinary person, a father, a neighbor, someone who seems normal until the day they do something unthinkable. It reminds us that closure is not guaranteed, that sometimes people disappear and are never found, that families can spend lifetimes waiting for answers that never come. And it reminds us that justice, when it arrives at all, can take far longer than we'd like to believe is acceptable. The investigation into the Skelton brothers' disappearance has been exhaustive. Over the 15 years since that Thanksgiving, law enforcement has pursued thousands of leads. They've conducted searches in multiple states. They've interviewed hundreds of people. They've used ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and every available technology to try to locate the boys. Volunteers have given countless hours to search efforts. They've walked through dense forests and waded through swamps. They've checked abandoned buildings and overgrown lots. They've looked in places where most people would never think to look. And they've come up empty every single time. The FBI got involved early in the case, as they typically do when children cross state lines or when local resources are overwhelmed. Federal agents brought additional expertise and resources to the investigation. They analyzed evidence, provided profiling assistance, and coordinated with law enforcement agencies across multiple jurisdictions. But even with federal involvement, the boys remained missing. Over the years, there have been reported sightings. People who thought they saw 3 brothers who looked like Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. Tips would come in from different parts of the country. Someone would see 3 boys of the right ages with a woman or a family and wonder if, maybe, just maybe, it was them. Each tip was investigated, each lead was followed, and each time it turned out to be a different family, different children, a case of mistaken identity or hopeful thinking. The emotional toll on everyone involved has been immeasurable. For Tanya, every holiday is a reminder of what she lost. Every Thanksgiving brings back the memories of that last drop-off, the last time she saw her sons alive. Birthdays come and go without celebrations. Christmas mornings happen without the chaos of children opening presents. Mother's Day is a cruel reminder of the children who should be calling or visiting but never will. The boys' sisters, the daughters Tanya had from her previous relationship, lost their little brothers. They've had to grow up with this tragedy as a defining feature of their lives. They've had to watch their mother grieve. They've had to answer questions from friends and acquaintances about what happened to their brothers. They've had to live with the knowledge that their stepfather, someone who was supposed to be part of their family, allegedly did something monstrous. The extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they've all been affected too. Family gatherings are forever changed. There are empty chairs at every table. There are 3 little boys who should be there, who should be growing up and becoming young men, who should be part of the family story. But they're frozen in memory, perpetually 9, 7, and 5. The Morenci community has carried this burden as well. In a town of only 2,000 people, everyone knows everyone. Many people knew the Skelton family personally. The boys attended the local school. They played in the same parks and playgrounds as other children. Their disappearance sent shockwaves through the entire community. Parents held their children a little tighter. People looked at their neighbors with new suspicion. The sense of safety that small towns often pride themselves on was shattered. And for law enforcement, this case has been a mission. The officers, detectives, and agents who have worked on it over the years have their own families. They have their own children. They understand what's been lost. They've dedicated thousands of hours to trying to find Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, to bring them home, to give their families some measure of peace. The frustration of not being able to crack the case, of not being able to make John Skelton tell the truth, has weighed on them. Throughout the investigation, various theories have been considered. Where could the boys be? What could have happened to them if John did harm them? And that's what the evidence suggests. Where did he put them? The cell phone data showing that early morning trip into Ohio is a critical piece of the puzzle. 20 miles into Ohio from Morenci. That's not a random distance. That suggests a specific destination. But Ohio is a big state, and 20 miles could put you in any number of locations. Rural farmland, wooded areas, near water, anywhere that someone looking to hide something might choose. Investigators have focused search efforts in that general area, but without more specific information, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. And if John moved the boys' remains to multiple locations, or if he hid them somewhere particularly well concealed, they might never be found. That's the grim reality that investigators have had to accept as a possibility. Some have wondered whether John had help. Could someone have assisted him? Could the mysterious Joanne Taylor, if she exists under a different name, have actually been involved? Could there be an accomplice who has kept silent all these years? It's possible, but investigators have found no evidence of anyone else being involved. All roads lead back to John Skelton alone. There's also been speculation about motive. Why would a father kill his own children? Even in the darkest moments of divorce and custody battles, most parents would never consider harming their kids. So what drove John to allegedly do this? Some psychological experts who have followed the case suggest that this could have been a case of familicide, specifically what's sometimes called family annihilation. This is when a parent, usually a father, kills their children and sometimes themselves, typically in the context of a perceived loss of control or family breakdown. The perpetrator often sees it as a way to maintain control when everything else is falling apart, or as a way to punish their spouse by taking away what matters most. The timing supports this theory. John's marriage had ended. He was losing his family. The divorce meant he would have limited access to his sons. He was unemployed and struggling. The Facebook post about seeking forgiveness suggests he knew he was about to do something terrible. And his alleged attempt at self-harm after the boys disappeared fits the pattern of someone who killed their children and then couldn't go through with killing themselves. If that's what happened, if John killed his boys in a moment of rage or despair or twisted logic, thinking he was somehow protecting them or punishing Tanya or maintaining some kind of control, then those boys likely died quickly. They probably didn't suffer long. That's cold comfort. But it's something Tanya and the family have had to hold on to. The alternative, that the boys suffered extensively, is too horrific to contemplate. The question of whether John will ever tell the truth has been debated endlessly. Why hasn't he confessed? Why hasn't he told anyone where the boys are? There are several possible explanations. One is that he still hopes to avoid a murder conviction. As long as there are no bodies, as long as he maintains his story about giving them away, there's a chance, however slim, that reasonable doubt could lead to an acquittal. Confessing would eliminate that possibility. Another explanation is pride or stubbornness. John has maintained his version of events for 15 years. To admit he was lying would mean admitting he's been playing games with grieving family members and dedicated investigators for a decade and a half. Some people, even facing overwhelming evidence, simply can't bring themselves to admit the truth. A third possibility is that John still enjoys having this power over everyone. He knows something that nobody else knows. He holds the answer to a question that has tortured people for 15 years. That knowledge gives him a kind of power, a way to maintain control even from behind bars. 4. Someone who lost control of every other aspect of his life. This might be something he's unwilling to give up. Or perhaps there's genuine mental illness involved. Perhaps John has convinced himself that his story is true, that the boys really are out there somewhere, safe with people who are caring for them. Perhaps he's constructed a delusion that allows him to live with what he did. It's possible, though investigators and psychologists who have evaluated him generally believe he's competent and aware of reality. Whatever the reason, John's silence has been his most consistent behavior throughout this entire ordeal. He talks, He gives explanations. He sends investigators on wild goose chases, but he never says anything that's actually true or helpful. The silence about what really happened that Thanksgiving weekend is deafening. As the murder case moves forward through the legal system, there will be many steps along the way. There will be preliminary hearings where prosecutors present evidence to show there's probable cause for the charges. There will be motions filed by defense attorneys challenging various aspects of the case. There will be negotiations about what evidence can be admitted at trial. There might even be plea bargain discussions, though it's hard to imagine what John could offer that prosecutors would accept unless he finally tells the truth about where the boys are. If the case goes to trial, it will be a major media event. Court TV and true crime networks will likely cover it extensively. Reporters will fill the courtroom. The public will watch closely as evidence is presented and witnesses testify. Tanya will likely be there, facing the man who took her children from her, hearing the details of the investigation and the evidence that suggests her sons are dead. The prosecution will build their case piece by piece. They'll present the cell phone records. They'll show the computer searches. They'll bring in witnesses who can testify about John's behavior and statements. They'll present expert testimony about statistical probabilities of children being missing for 15 years and still being alive. They'll demonstrate through the accumulation of evidence that there's only one reasonable conclusion. John Skelton killed his 3 sons. The defense will try to poke holes in the prosecution's case. They'll argue that without bodies, without a clear cause of death, without witnesses or physical evidence of homicide, you can't prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. They'll suggest that the boys could still be alive somewhere, that stranger things have happened, that the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. They'll try to create just enough doubt in the minds of jurors to prevent a conviction. It will come down to 12 people, a jury of John's peers, who will have to weigh the evidence and make a decision. Can you convict someone of murder when you don't have bodies? When you don't have a weapon or a crime scene? When all you have is circumstantial evidence, however compelling that evidence might be? The answer is yes, you can. It's been done before. There are cases throughout American legal history where people have been convicted of murder without bodies. In fact, there's even a term for it, a no-body murder case. These cases rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, but when that evidence is strong enough, when the accumulation of facts points inescapably to murder, juries do convict. One of the most famous no-body cases was the Hans Reiser case in California, where a computer programmer was convicted of murdering his wife, even though her body wasn't found for years. The circumstantial evidence, his behavior, his lies, the forensic evidence in his car, was overwhelming. The jury convicted him. He later led authorities to his wife's remains as part of a plea deal on other charges. Another well-known case is the Drew Peterson case in Illinois, where a former police officer was convicted of murdering his 3rd wife, whose death was initially ruled an accident and is suspected in the disappearance of his 4th wife, whose body has never been found. Again, circumstantial evidence and a pattern of behavior led to conviction. The Skelton Brothers case could join these ranks. The evidence against John is substantial. The lack of any credible alternative explanation for where the boys are is damning. And the fact that he's lied consistently for 15 years suggests consciousness of guilt, an awareness that he did something he needs to hide. But nothing is certain in the legal system. Cases that seem slam dunk sometimes fall apart. Witnesses perform poorly on the stand. Evidence gets excluded on technicalities. Juries surprise everyone with unexpected verdicts. Until 12 people come back into a courtroom and announce their decision, nobody really knows what will happen. For Tanya and the family, the trial will be both necessary and agonizing. Necessary, because they need justice, they need accountability, they need some form of closure. But agonizing because it means reliving the worst period of their lives in excruciating detail. It means hearing testimony about what might have happened to Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. It means seeing John, seeing his face, hearing his voice, confronting the man who destroyed their family. There's also the possibility, however remote, that facing a murder trial might finally break through John's defenses. Confronted with the reality of spending the rest of his life in prison if convicted, facing the detailed presentation of evidence against him, watching the impact on the family, he might decide to tell the truth. He might finally reveal where the boys are. It's happened in other cases. Defendants who have maintained innocence for years sometimes break down and confess when the weight of the legal process becomes too much. If that happens, if John finally tells the truth, it would be a bittersweet moment. The family would finally know for certain what happened. They would be able to recover the boys' remains and lay them to rest properly. They could visit graves, have a place to go to feel close to their children. But it would also mean confronting the confirmed reality that the boys are dead, that there was never any hope they were alive somewhere, that the worst fears were true all along. And even if John confesses and leads authorities to the remains, it won't answer all the questions. It won't fully explain why he did it. It won't make sense of how a father could kill his own children. Some things can't be explained because they're fundamentally irrational acts born from darkness that most of us can't comprehend. The Skelton Brothers case also raises broader questions about our systems in society. How do we better protect children in custody disputes? How do we identify warning signs before tragedies occur? John had exhibited concerning behavior months before the boys disappeared when he tried to take them to Florida. The system got the boys back that time, but was there more that could have been done to prevent what came later? These are difficult questions without easy answers. We can't monitor every parent going through a divorce. We can't predict with certainty who will snap and do something terrible. We balance the rights of parents with the safety of children. And sometimes, tragically, that balance fails. The case also highlights the challenges of modern missing persons investigations. In 2010, social media and cell phone tracking were relatively new investigative tools. They provided some evidence in this case, like the cell phone records showing John's trip to Ohio, but they weren't enough to solve the case. Today, with even more sophisticated technology, would the outcome be different? Would we have better surveillance footage, more detailed digital trails, more ways to track and verify people's movements? Maybe, but technology only helps if we use it effectively and if people cooperate with investigations. What this case definitely shows is the incredible dedication of law enforcement professionals who never gave up. 15 years is a long time to work on a single case. Officers retire, detectives move to different departments, priorities shift. But someone always kept the Skelton Brothers case active. Someone always followed up on tips. Someone always looked for new angles. That persistence is what led to the murder charges being filed just before John's release. That determination is what gives the family hope for justice. It's worth taking a moment to remember Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, not as statistics or case numbers, but as real children who lived, who laughed, who had personalities and preferences and futures that were stolen from them. Andrew, the oldest at 9, was entering that age where childhood starts giving way to adolescence. He probably had favorite subjects in school, friends he played with, dreams about what he wanted to be when he grew up. Alexander, at 7, was likely full of energy and questions, that age where everything is interesting and the world is full of possibilities. And Tanner, just 5 years old, was still so young, so innocent, probably still believing in magic and heroes and the idea that adults always keep you safe. These were real boys with real lives. They deserved to grow up. They deserved to become teenagers and then young men. They deserved to make mistakes and learn from them, to fall in love, to find their passions, to contribute to the world in whatever ways they would have chosen. They deserved so much more than what happened to them on Thanksgiving weekend 2010. Their memory has been kept alive by their mother, by their extended family, by the community of Morenci, and by everyone who has followed this case and refused to forget about them. There are still missing persons posters with their faces in various places. There are still social media pages dedicated to finding them. There are still people who light candles on their birthdays and on the anniversary of their disappearance. And now, finally, there might be justice. The murder charges represent a turning point in a case that seemed to have nowhere left to go. They represent law enforcement saying, "We know what happened, we know who's responsible, and we're going to hold him accountable. They represent hope that even without bodies, even without confessions, the truth can still prevail. The outcome of John Skelton's murder trial will reverberate far beyond Morenci, Michigan. It will be watched by other families of missing children, who will see it as a test of whether the justice system can deliver accountability even in the most challenging circumstances. It will be analyzed by legal experts who will debate the sufficiency of circumstantial evidence in no-body murder cases. It will be discussed by true crime followers who have been invested in this case for years. But most importantly, it matters to Tanya and to everyone who loved Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. For them, this trial is about more than legal theory or forensic evidence. It's about their boys. It's about saying that those 3 lives mattered, that their loss counts, that the person who took them from this world must face consequences. As we wait for the legal process to unfold, as we watch this case move toward whatever resolution awaits, we should keep the focus where it belongs, on 3 innocent children who deserved so much better than what they got, on a mother who has endured unimaginable pain with remarkable strength, on a community that has never stopped caring, and on the principle that justice, even when delayed, is still worth pursuing. The story of the Skelton brothers is not over yet. There are still chapters to be written. There will be court proceedings, testimony, evidence presentations, jury deliberations, and eventually a verdict. There may yet be revelations that change our understanding of what happened. There may be moments of truth that have been hidden for 15 years. But regardless of what happens in the courtroom, some things are already clear. 3 beautiful boys are gone. A family has been shattered. A community has been scarred. And evil, in one form or another, visited Morenci, Michigan on Thanksgiving 2010 and left devastation in its wake. This is the story of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton, 3 brothers who went to visit their father and never came home, 3 children whose disappearance launched a 15-year investigation that continues to this day, 3 lives that matter, that will be remembered, and that deserve justice. The untold cold case of the Skelton brothers is untold no longer. The world knows their names. The world knows their story. And soon, perhaps, the world will know the full truth of what happened to them and see justice finally served. Until then, we remember. We honor their memory. We stand with their family, and we refuse to let them be forgotten. Because that's what we owe to Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton. 3 little boys who deserved so much more than they got, but who will not be lost to history. Their story will be told. Their names will be remembered. And their case will be a reminder that some mysteries demand answers, no matter how long it takes to find them. This has been the story of the Skelton brothers. Thank you for watching.